Hello and welcome. So today we're going to be reading chapter 2 of Soiled Doves by Anne Seagraves. But before we get to chapter 2, we're going to read about the notorious Lola Manchas, and this is the image that they have with it. And so, courtesy of the California State Liberty, Sacramento, California, Lola Manchas, Damsou's actress and one of the most sought-after courtesans of her era. So we're just going to go ahead, get right on into it. Quote, "Notorious I have always been and never famous," end quote, were the words of Lola Manchas, often used when describing herself. Lola, the daughter of a Spanish beauty and a soldier in the British Army, began her tumultuous life in Limerick, Ireland in 1818. She rose from her humble origins to become a noted danseuse and one of the most sought-after courtesans of her era. Lola lived a life of confusion and make-believe. She had the ability to invent whatever she pleased and the power to convince others it was fact. Although her dancing skills were not outstanding, she gained access to the most of the royal courts of Europe. Lola was always seen in the company of a gentleman of wealth and position, and she was considered a fatal beauty. King Ludwig of Bavaria was so smitten with her beauty that he gave Lola a title and the keys to his country. She had an affair with his Imperial Majesty Nicholas I of Russia. Her charms won the heart of Alexander Dumas, but she fell in love with his best friend Alexander Dumargier, a French journalist. Sorry if I'm totally butchering that. When Lola came to San Francisco, the electrifying lady married Patrick Huell, the wealthy publisher of the San Francisco Whig. The couple moved to the small mining towns of Grass Valley, California, where Lola found happiness for a brief period. Her home was lavish. She smoked Cuban cigars, ate imported foods, and drank the finest liquor. It was said the eccentric lady bathed in champagne and dried herself with rose petals. She kept a pet bear and lived parrot who perched upon her shoulders. Wow. You think she'd be... This is like first time I'm hearing of her. Maybe it's because I don't know a lot about the history of prostitution. So this is a new subject to me, but the woman who had a pet bear and a pet parrot, whose legacy is that she bathed in champagne and dried herself off in rose petals. I mean, I'm sure she must have been in the talk of the town for the time being. Amazing, like, a woman of history isn't like more pronounced in, I don't know, just topic of today. Like, I just find that interesting. Although Lola only spent 2 years in Grass Valley, she played an important role in the area's history, and she is well remembered. When Hull left the lovely dancer for his newspaper, she shook off her husband as easily as she had her other lovers and then moved on. Lola's spider dance brought her a measure of success, but her bad temper, shocking antics, and outrageous love affairs eventually destroyed her life. On January 17th, 1861, the notorious lady died alone at the age of 42 in a squalid boarding house in the Hell's Kitchen district of New York City. And that's it. She lived and she died. The next image is from the Timothy Golden collection, Missoula, Montana, a moment of relaxation. And then the image with the woman in the home is Courtesy of the Denver Public Library, Western History Department, Marnar. Okay, so this is where they're getting the photos anyway, but it's Bell's Bernard's Parlor House in Denver, Colorado. So this is a lady of relaxation, and then the women over here. And And you can always pause the video if you'd like to look at the images longer. The title of this one is The Girls, the Madame, and the Professor. They're all just lounging about here. There you are. And then this one is Time for a Reflection. It's a woman in a gown having her flowers. Oh, that's interesting. That is an interesting dress. This is Maddie Silks at the age of 40. I like the dress. That's an interesting dress. Okay. On to chapter 2 now. It happened on Holiday Street. Holiday Street in Denver, Colorado was known as the wickedest through far in the West. Approximately 1,000 ladies of the evening piled their trade in the elegant parlor houses, fancy brothels, and shabby cribs which lined both sides of the street. Jenny Rogers, Rosa Lee, Lizzie Preston, and Maddie Silks were among the many shady ladies who operated business in this infamous tenderloin. They were often referred to as, quote, giddy girls of Holiday Street, and were frequently arrested on charges of conducting lewd houses. At one time, things were so bad that the girls threatened to hire an attorney and carry their fight all the way to the Supreme Court. Jenny Rogers was considered the most beautiful of the madames, but Maddie Silks was the undisputed queen of Denver's red light district and the leading royalty for over 2 decades. Wow. She was a diminutive hellraiser who drank expensive champagne, played the horses, and enjoyed life to its fullest. Her boarding houses were known throughout the West for their beautiful young ladies and elegant decor. Although Maddie was born in a small farm in Kansas in 1846, she was never a typical farmer's daughter. That's a bit of an understatement, I'd say. While the other girls dreamed of handsome husbands, Maddie had other plans. She knew at an early age that her chosen profession would be that of a glamorous madame in high-class parlor house. When the opportunity arrived, Maddie, like most of the women who had crossed the Missouri before her, left her past behind. In 1865, at the age of 19, sorry, I'm emphasizing that because that's how old I currently am. At the time of this recording, I'm 19. So when she was 19, Maddie Stokes was running a parlor house in Springfield, Illinois. She was no doubt the youngest madame on the frontier and proudly claimed that she had never been a prostitute. It is believed that Maddie's early career was financed by a wealthy Kansas City madame. As Maddie worked her way from Springfield to other boom towns, she operated only the finest houses and catered to the elite. The petite madame soon became known as the darling of the demi-monde. It was said that Maddie resembled a vest pocket edition of the famous Lily Langtry because of her clear, creamy complexion, impudent blue eyes, and blonde curls piled high upon her head. She dressed in the latest fashions, and all of her dresses were carefully tailored to conceal 2 special pockets, one for her gold coins and the other for her ivory-handled pistol. Life was tough in the West. Oh my gosh. Again, so this is the first time I've ever read this. I'm blown away by these like strong, empowered like women of like this point in history making do with what it was a man's world at the time. And I think that's fantastic that she got her dress specially tailored. All of them. Makes me speechless almost. Anyway, in 1876, Maddie brought her girls to Denver and opened a fashionable house on Holiday Street. Within a brief period, Maddie, who had always been a successful businesswoman, had what was considered a carriage trade. The money was rolling in. She had just about everything a reigning madame could desire, except a permanent lover. That wish, however, was fulfilled in 1877 when she met Court Tomlinson, a cocky little foot racer who wore pink tights and star-spangled blue running trunks. Maddie's inflation for the swaggering dandy was so great that she fought a duel with another Holiday Street madame over his affections. When the smoke from the woman's blazing pistols cleared, the youngest Maddie fought the other madame had wounded her man. He was not so badly injured, and soon temperate love affair blossomed between Maddie and the flashy little runner, who often bragged that he was too proud to do a day's work. Oh my gosh. The fact that Court had a wife and daughter tucked away somewhere in his past didn't bother Maddie at all. During the following years, he spent Maddie's money on gambling, expensive whiskey, and eventually other women. Oh. At times, he would ride his horse up the steps of her parlor house and through the door arrogantly demanding more money. On these occasions, Maddie would smile tolerantly and shower him with coins. Once Court brought in a glittering cross covered with diamonds, but even that was purchased with Maddie's money. Nevertheless, she cherished his gift and only removed it when necessary. Maddie's affair with the little dandy turned into marriage after Court's wife died in 1884. At the time, it was said that he only married Maddie for her money, not for her love. 2 years later, when Court was informed that his daughter had died leaving a small granddaughter, he refused to accept the responsibility of raising the unfortunate child. Maddie felt differently. She adopted the little girl and placed her in a good boarding home. Court died in 1900 when Maddie was 54 years old. She was still in love with a worthless man. In death, as in life, Maddie provided him with the best. His funeral was extravagant, and her tears were many. It was estimated that during their relationships, Court had borrowed or spent over $50,000 of Maddie's money. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna calculate how much 50,000 was in the year of 1900. So one sec. All right, hi. So after calculating 50,000 in the year 1900, so that is the time of his death, so he spent it previously, so it would have been worth more than this, but in today's money, for 50,000 in 1900, it was worth 1,646,363.10 cents. So she was very wealthy, and he blew a lot of money right out of her pocket. That is insane. Okay, yeah, that's wild. Okay. Right, let's get back to the reading. Following Court's death, Maddie began to show her age. She had grown plump over the years, and her chin was no longer smooth and firm. Business, however, was still flourishing, so she hired handsome Jack Reddy, a large, flamboyant man, many years her junior. Reddy, who was fond of money, became her bouncer and financial advisor. He soon became her lover. The couple lived a wild and extravagant life. In 1923, when Maddie was 77, she finally married Reddy. Maddie knew she was growing old, and she wanted someone to provide comfort and care in her declining years. They moved into a cottage in Lawrence Street, and Jack Reddy remained true to Maddie until her death in 1929 at the age of 83. Oh. Her funeral was quiet. There was no songs or flowers. Maddie was buried beside Court Thompson, who had always been her only lover. Who had always been, Court Thompson, who had always been her only love. Prostitution in Denver had ended years before Maddie died, and her fortune had declined, although it had been estimated that the petite madame had almost $2 million pass through her hands during her career. Seems more than that, but she left very little behind. Maddie's estate consisted of $4,000, a few pieces of jewelry, and some property. All of it divided between her adopted granddaughter and her husband. Handsome Jack Reddy did not get the fortune he had bargained for, and he died a pauper 2 years later. His burial expenses were paid for through a collection of taken from the bar rooms he frequented. A collection taken from the bar rooms he frequented. How about that? And it shows Lil Louvois. Sorry, my camera was having an issue. Anyway, it shows Lil Louvois here. Yeah. Anyway, during the heyday of prostitution, Holiday Street gained an unsavory reputation that spread across the West. The disgruntled haze of Ben Holiday, for whom the street was named, petitioned the city's fathers to change its name. They obligingly renamed it Market Street, but the sordid business conducted there went on as usual. A few of the ladies who operated boarding houses after the name was changed were Annie Ryan, Belle Bernard, Lil Love, and Veronica Baldwin, with the latter two arrived in the late 1890s. Both of these ladies occupied the same house on different occasions, and their stories are unusual. Lil Love was a tall, glamorous woman who had been a leading madame in Creede, Colorado. She moved to Denver and operated a fancy parlor house at 2020 Market Street. Within a short time, her business was so lucrative that she sent for her sister, Louis, to join her. Neither Lil nor Louis realized that their place of business would soon be one of tragedy. Lou was a beautiful woman, but much younger and less experienced than her sister Lil. One evening, an important businessman visited Lou as a client and fell madly in love with the alluring prostitute. She returned his affections and soon proposed marriage. Lou knew she could never marry her lover, for it would destroy his career and ruin him socially. The respectable citizen of Denver did not openly associate or accept a woman who was a soiled dove. The man continued to plead with Lou, and she realized the situation was hopeless. The next time he left town on a business trip, the young woman took a bottle of poison off the shelf, swallowed its contents, and died within a few minutes. Lil discovered her sister's lifeless body the next day and blamed herself for inviting Lou to come to Denver. She buried her sister, but she could never bury the grief within her heart. When the businessman returned, he was informed of his lover's suicide and immediately went to her grave. Standing alone in the cemetery, he looked down at the mound of earth that covered what was once a beautiful woman and realized that he did not want to live without her. He drew his pistol, put a bullet through his brain, and fell beside the fresh grave of the woman fell beside the fresh grave of the woman who had loved her man too much to marry him. Lil Louvois attempted to continue on with her own life, but things would never be the same as they were. She missed Lou, and the lonely days became endless. A few years later, too, died, leaving an estimated $40,000. All the money in the world could never make up for the loss of her beloved sister. Shortly after the death of Lil Louvois, the house at 2020 Market Street was occupied by Veronica Baldwin. She came to the infamous street as a notorious woman whose name had been splashed across the nation's headlines frequently from 1883 to 1887. Veronica, a tall, slender, regal woman with magnetic hazel eyes, was the cousin of the multi-millionaire womanizer E.G. Lucky Baldwin. Her name first blazed across the newspapers January 5th, 1883, when she shot and wounded her famous cousin. At the time, she was employed by Baldwin as a teacher at his California ranch. The headlines in San Francisco Call read, "A woman's revenge. Lucky Baldwin shot by his young cousin Veronica. Yesterday at 10 o'clock, a young woman who calls herself Veronica Baldwin, a cousin, is shot. E.J. Baldwin through the left arm at the level of his heart, and he was leaving his private dining room on the second floor of the Baldwin Hotel. She fired at him from a distance of 6 feet without warning. She was immediately disarmed and arrested." Veronica admitted to the shooting, claiming that he first assaulted her, then he had left her fired. She further said that she could have killed him because she was a good shot, and that she wished she had killed him. Baldwin said his cousin had been blackmailing him, and at the trial he declined to testify against her. Veronica left the state. She appeared again in 1886, threatening to sue Baldwin for the support of a baby she claimed he had fathered. The threat was quietly handled. The next time Veronica made the headlines, it was to say that her cousin had it says had here in the text. It says had. All right. It was to say that her cousin had her committed to the state mental asylum at Napa, California. The next few years are not recorded. Veronica reappeared in the late 1890s when she moved to Denver and opened a business on Market Street. It was said that Lucky Baldwin provided her with the money she needed. It was also said that the lady disappeared. No evidence of insanity. Exclamation point. So it's no evidence of insanity. I believe that just men ruled that time period, especially in America. And so, oh man, she's crazy. They'd lock her up. The ordeal that she had been through, however, left its mark upon the unfortunate woman. Although Veronica was still young, lines were etched upon her comely face. Her hair was prematurely gray, and she walked with a slow, measured step. Miss Baldwin was no longer the same person the California newspaper once described as, quote, the most beautiful girl on the Pacific coast. With Veronica, Market Street acquired a bit of classy and dignity. Her parlor house was tastefully decorated with Victorian furniture and valuable paintings. She served fine French wine in crystal glasses, imported delicacies, and in-season fresh oysters brought in from the coast. All of Veronica's girls were beautiful and well-educated. They wore almost the most stylish gowns and expensive perfumes. Disorderly conduct was never permitted and a gentleman who had consumed too much wine was discreetly escorted to the door. Gonna wait for the train to go by. Chug, 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 chug. Choo choo. It'll just be a moment. Sometimes they're little trains, but that one is a bit longer than I was thinking it might be. Okay. Her clientele were wealthy and famous and came by invitation. They were greeted at the door by a butler and led to the parlor where the distinguished madame awaited. Veronica always wore royal purple, decorated with a touch of white lace. She presented a regal figure and spoke with a gentle English accent. A visit to her parlor house was one that was not easily forgotten. When Denver's red light district closed in 1915, Veronica calmly closed her business and moved into one of the most fashionable neighborhoods. She continued to live a quiet, dignified life. She never spoke of her past or the baby she claimed Lucky Baldwin had fathered. It has been assumed that the child was taken from Veronica when she was placed in the asylum and raised by foster parents or its own father. Oh, no wonder she had premature grace. If she'd lost like a child, that's so heart-wrenching. Although the lights of Denver's Red District had been dark for many years, Veronica Baldwin, Lil Love, and the darling of them all, Maddie Silks, will live on in history. They will be remembered along with the other notorious ladies of Holiday Street as a part of Denver's wild and colorful past. This next is a note of saved from a life of vice. Notorious procuress cheated of her prey by a demi-mondaine. A pretty blue-eyed young woman arrived in the city last Tuesday night. Intended to seek employment. At an employment office, she met a woman who had advertised her to adopt a course of vice. Before the recruit began her career, she was saved, and last evening 2 city detectives escorted her to the Union Depot and placed her on a train bound for the home of a relative. At the police station, the young woman was booked as Mary Anderson. That, however, is not her correct name. She came to Denver from a Wyoming town hoping to better her condition. About 9 o'clock Tuesday night, the woman, in company with the notorious procuress, rang the bell of a brothel where she was referred to another. At the latter place, arrangements were quickly completed. The strange girl was exceedingly pretty. She had large blue eyes and a great abundance of brown hair. Her features were regular and her face as innocent as a little child. In less than half an hour, the landlady was informed that the girl was innocent. Veronica Baldwin, the landlady, was quickly convinced the statement was only too true. A chance had come true to warn an innocent beginner of the error of her ways, and Veronica, once the most notorious woman of the Pacific Coast, the former mistress of Lucky Baldwin, was not slow to avail herself of it. She pleaded with the girl for the sake of mother and family to return to her home. Miss Anderson was sent away from the house Tuesday night and placed in a respectable dwelling. Yesterday, Captain Martin was notified by Veronica Baldwin and detailed detectives Burwell and McDuff to investigate. The young woman was brought to police headquarters yesterday afternoon and placed in charge of the matron. Her story was believed by all who heard it, and gratified was indeed touching. Last evening she was sent away to her relatives, the police department bearing the expense of transportation. I don't really understand its placement among the book, but maybe we'll get more context as we go. That was Rocky Mountain News, April 28, 1898. And the Court Keepers of Bagnivores. Belle Bernard, Gussie Grant, Lizzie Preston, Jenny Carl. Sorry, it's just a lot of the giddy girls of Holiday Street, charged with keeping lewd houses and who gave bond in the district court last week for their appearance in the criminal court and arraigned today before Judge Ruggs and pleaded not guilty. It has a list of madams. The girls have formed a pool to testify this matter, and if they are convicted in the criminal court, they will enter a plea of jurisdiction by way of abandonment and carry the case into the Supreme Court. Denver Daily Times, September 4th, 1886. And this is the House of Mirrors. Here. Goes on to Maddie Silks' House of Mirrors. The House of Mirrors was built in 1889 by Jenny Rogers, a popular madame of the late 1800s. It was an imposing structure that stood at 1942 Market Street in Denver, Colorado. If its walls could speak, they would no doubt tell of millionaires, blackmail, and greed. When Jenny passed away in 1902, most of the stories died with her. She did, however, leave a legacy of 5 bizarre faces sculpted in rose stone that for more than 50 years remained to peer down upon the once famous street. I don't know, the photo doesn't really show it that well. The following paragraph, taken from the files of the Western History Department of the Denver Public Library, describes these strange figures. At the top is that of a clear-eyed maiden on whose lips smiled joy. Below and to the left, framed in long hair, is a horribly sensual face, one eye closed and leer above thick slobbering lips. Next is a woman not much older than the young girl above. The 5th face is the narrow L of the house, and behind her is that of an embittered old man with cruel eyes, his hairy mustache cushioned on bulbous jaws. Although there have been many tales told about the strange faces, only Jenny Rogers knew their meaning. Did the presence of these faces represent a pair of her colorful life, or were they put there as a bad joke that would live on after she was gone? Whatever the true story, Mattie Silks purchased the house shortly after Jenny's death and immediately placed a large M. Silks upon the tiled doorstep. The House of Mirrors was the perfect setting for the dynamic Mattie. This opulent establishment had doorposts carved to represent phallic symbols, an elegant reception room, and a parlor with plate glass mirrors that covered the walls. The chandelier, made of hundreds of glass faucet prisms, hung from an 8-foot mirrored ceiling and gave the room a shimmering beauty that reflected upon a golden harp and rich brocade chairs. In the resplendent ballroom, Mattie's scantily clad ladies entertained their wealthy customers. They drank expensive champagne and rolled around the parquet dance floor. These ladies would eventually lead the eager men up the stairs that were covered with oriental carpeting, past the tall, slender windows, and onto the fancy bedrooms. There were 20 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. It was a house that suited the new owner, since both were bold and expensive, and the envy of Market Street. Mattie merrily presided over her mansion until the red lights of Denver were extinguished in 1915. The next owner of the famous house was oh, that's great. The next owner the next owner of the famous house was that of the Buddhist church. Oh, that is great. That's great. I love that. Was that of the Buddhist church? Its members worshipped in the mirrored parlor, and the soft-spoken priest taught a different kind of love, one of joy and a pure, peaceful life. Oh, that just feels so ironic. I don't know. I just can't help it. When the Buddhists left, the house became one of many warehouses that lined the street. The House of Mirrors fell into obscenity and disarray. Eventually, like the rest of what had once been a part of Denver's red light district, it was dismantled and had become just another memory of turbulent era. That's sad. You think it'd be like a historical remark? This is moral conditions, and it's the women being imprisoned here. I'm going to go ahead and read The French Woman Raided. Over 100 pulled in from the sinks and drives. Over 100 French women were arrested yesterday afternoon, one in indictments from the grand jury. From noon until nearly 5 o'clock, Main Street, West Denver, and Holiday from the 17th to 22nd was a scene of great excitement. Sheriff Wilbur sent the Sheriff Wheeler with about 30 assistants to make the raid. The officers had 2 ambushes drawn by 6 white horses each. As fast as a load was obtained, it was sent to the courthouse, and the ambushes returned for more. Holiday and some of the cross street in this vicinity has not witnessed such a scene in many a day. Many of the inmates had not arisen from their drunken slumbers and debauchery of the night before. Some swore, some cried, and others laughed. Frail women in frailer garments were hurrying from room to room. Escape was impossible. They were herded like sheep. Some of the late risers, sick, had to be given time to dress. One woman hastily placed a placard, quote, "for rent" on her door and hid in a trunk. Holiday Street was thronged. Chatter, 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 and these women! Their talk was like the confusion of the Tower of Babel. Some were mad, some were swollen, some laughed, some danced, and they all wanted beer and cigarettes. Old and young, some were young in their teens. The hair of others were growing gray, and their faces haunted in sin. Some had cots. There were only a few cots, and they were given to those who were sick. One of the girls, known as, quote, Bigham, quote, was given a cot. She weighed 310 pounds, and in climbing the step had to stop and lean on the banister to rest. Those who had cots were to bed semi-dressed. Hats, wraps, and dresses were hung on the nails in the rooms. Here and there hung handsome undergarments as fine as the dry good house of the city can afford. Thoughts for the sick girl. They are thoughtful of each other. Quote, "Where is little Annie?" Quote, "She is sick and can hardly sit up," unquote, said one of the girls in pleading voice to the deputy sheriff. The inmates of the room looked it over and saw that every cot was taken. Quote, "I'll give Annie my cot," quote, she said. Quote, "She can have mine," said another. Everyone had a cot offered it to the sick, quote, "little Annie," unquote, as they called her. And that's an excerpt from the Denver Republic, Saturday, May 4th, 1889, page 6. This is Squirrel Tooth Alice, quote unquote, Squirrel Tooth Alice. This Dodge City prostitute has the haunting beauty of the Cowtown era. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out if she's holding a squirrel. What is she holding on her lap here is what I don't know. It looks like a dead animal, but I'm not sure. I'm not confident. I have no clue what she's holding. It looks like a pet of sorts. I don't know if it's alive or not. Anyway, that is the end of chapter 2. It has excerpts from newspapers and reports sprinkled throughout it. Next chapter is chapter 3, Working Girls. And yes, that is the end of today's chapter of chapter 2. If you found that chapter interesting, please let me know in the comments down below what you liked about it, what stood out to you. Just let me know in the comments. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little bell notification. Yeah. I thought that was quite interesting. Definitely some women of history I had not heard about, some tragedies in there. There's a lot going on in that chapter. All right, yeah. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.